What is going on, boys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are breaking down the buy low players that you should potentially target in trades. Some of the players on this list, their value right now is going to be the lowest it is all season, so you might want to target them and get a pretty sweet deal. It could help you win in the long run. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. I want to talk about some snubs on this list, guys that I know are underperforming, but I couldn't tell you in good faith to buy low in them because I have my legitimate concerns with these players. In a future video very soon, I'm going to be talking about these type of players at length, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let me just briefly talk about some of these guys. Timo Meier, I'm very concerned about his deployment. Tristan Jarry, I'm very concerned about the Penguins defense, their depth, their aging core. I'm very concerned about how Jarry is going to fare in that type of environment. Next up, we have Ilya Samsonov of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, I labeled him as a must-draft goalie, so this was pretty disappointing, but he's getting outplayed by Joseph Woll. So if that continues, he is definitely going to lose starts. It could be a split moving forward, so obviously his value is taking a huge hit. We will see what happens, but for now, I have legitimate concerns about him, and he's only signed to a one-year contract, so it's not like the Leafs are committed to him. It's not looking good for Samsonov owners. Next up, we have Mikhail Sergachev, and obviously the main issue is that he's not on the first unit. He was on that first unit for a decent amount of last season. He really excelled on there. He played better than Hedman, in my opinion, but unfortunately, Hedman has taken back that spot. Hedman's playing pretty good, so unless Hedman starts to struggle immensely or the power play starts to struggle immensely, Sergachev is not going to get a look on that. I'm also concerned about how he's playing in general. He's turning over the puck quite a bit. He's still putting up some points, even strength, and obviously he puts up great peripherals, shots, hits, and blocks, so he has value, but I wouldn't be going out of my way to trade for him. Another guy I'm concerned about is Connor Bedard. I told you guys not to draft him. I thought he was going way too high, and it's not like he's playing bad. It's just the talent surrounding him is so terrible that it's going to be hard for him to put up elite numbers and justify his ADP. So for me, I'm not going out and trading for Bedard. There's just too much risk. Then finally, we have some Flames players. Jacob Markstrom. It's looking like it's right back to last season where the Flames are not letting a lot of shots against, which is bad for fantasy, and they're still letting in a lot of goals. I'm very concerned about the Flames. I think Markstrom is not going to have a great save percentage or goals against average. We'll see what happens, but I'm not going out of my way to trade for him right now. And then finally, the other Flames player is Jonathan Huberdeau, and he has 4 points in 7 games, which isn't bad, but in my opinion, from watching some of the Flames games, he does not look very good. He's still forcing passes in situations that he shouldn't be. Sometimes his passes are too hard and his teammates can't handle them. The passes aren't timed correctly. I just think that when he's not surrounded by elite talent, he's not going to put up elite numbers. I could be wrong and he has a great season. I still think he is going to have a better season than last year, but it's not going to be by much. So I'm not going to go out of my way and trade for a guy like Huberdeau. Maybe if somebody drops him, I could take a look at him, hold him for a week, see if he could actually put up some numbers. But with the way the Flames are looking as a team, even just looking at their roster on paper, it just doesn't look very good. So yeah, not a big fan of Jonathan Huberdeau for this season. Just quickly, boys, I want to talk about some other trade targets I like. Some of these guys are buy lows or just players that I think are going to have great seasons. I'll just list this off real quick. Pavel Buchnevich, he's been injured, so you might be able to get a good deal for him. Matt Boldy is also out week to week, so you could snag him, put him on your IR. We also have Miro Heiskanen. The Dallas Stars have started off slow, and they haven't played too many games, so you could get a good deal. Kempe is a guy I think is going to have a great year, so I like targeting him. Line is injured right now, so you could get a snag on him. Luke Hughes is a guy who's playing first-line power play over Dougie Hamilton. That might be the situation for the rest of the year, so he will have a lot of value, and I think he's going to improve as the season goes on, so definitely one of my favorite trade targets as well. We have Mike Matheson, one of the most underrated players in fantasy and in real life. He's just a guy that you're going to want on your team, especially if your league value shots, hits, and blocks. We have Zach Werenski, who's been injured. You might be able to get a good deal for him. He's a guy that has so much value. Just look at the last couple of seasons when he was healthy. He can score so many goals and he takes so many shots. Then we have Alex Pietrangelo, who's also been injured. He hasn't returned yet, but he was great last season, so another great trade target and a buy low. Then lastly, we have Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's playing on the first unit with Victor Arvidsson out long-term with a back injury, so he has a lot of value on this Kings offense. He's playing even strength on a line with Kevin Fiala, so he's going to have some big nights and some big weeks. I really think he's a great trade target. Right before we get started, boys, I wanted to give you my picks tonight for Drafters Fantasy Sports. Shane Pinto inspired me. I'm going to call this the Shane Pinto Parlay. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the over on Ryan Johansson points and the over on Pavel Buchnevich points. If you guys want to do these NHL pick'ems, head on over to Drafters Fantasy Sports. It's available on desktop or iOS and Android. And what you're going to want to do is sign up using referral code FIREDUP. And when depositing a minimum of $20 using promo code FIREDUP, they will match your deposit 100% up to $100. So 20 gets you 40, 100 gets you 200. It's a very good deal, guys. Make sure you gamble responsibly and good luck. The first player we got to talk about is Barrett Hayton of the Arizona Coyotes. One of my favorite guys to target in drafts this season because you could practically get him for free. Basically, what happened last year is he started off super slow, but in the last 49 games, he put up 18 goals and a total of 38 points. That line of Schmaltz, Hayton, and Keller was one of the best lines in the NHL during the second half last season. Keller was breaking out. Schmaltz is super underrated. He's also a guy that's only 24 years old, so those are the reasons why I labeled him as a breakout. Unfortunately, he started slow once again, 0 points in 6 games. And listen, guys, obviously this is a buy low video. I am not worried about Barrett Hayton at all, so let me break it down. The first reason I think Hayton is a great buy low candidate is his deployment. He's getting 20 minutes and 5 seconds of ice time per game. That's almost 3 minutes more than he had last season. If we're also taking a look at power play time, he's getting much more power play time than he did last year, right? He's going to be within the realm of 3 to 4 minutes of power play time per game, and that's a big improvement. Their power play percentage is around 28%. It's top 5 in the league right now. Obviously, very small sample size, but this power play has improved with the introduction of Sean Durzi and Logan Cooley. And Hayton is going to be on that first line power play. He is on the bumper in the net front position, but still, guys, he is going to put up points on this power play that's looking pretty good so far. Schmaltz and Keller being on his line have 7 points in 6 games, and Barrett Hayton has 0 points. So, in my opinion, this is just bad puck luck. Maybe a couple of unlucky bounces that haven't gone his way. I also want to say that I've watched a handful of Coyotes games, and he looks pretty darn good out there. He's all over the ice. He's had a ton of chances. They actually took back a goal that he had because there was an offside on the power play. The production will come, guys. I promise you that. Some people might be worried that they're going to move Cooley up to the first line instead of Hayton, but I do not think this is going to be the case based off the chemistry that these three guys have and the fact that Hayton is a bigger body. Cooley's 5'10", Hayton 6'1". Hayton also is better at faceoffs than Logan Cooley, so I think they are going to keep that line of Schmaltz, Hayton, and Keller together, and I do expect him to start producing. Obviously, in a more shallow league, like 14 teams or less, he's probably sitting on the waiver wire, but if you're in a deep league where it's hard to find value on the wire, I suggest targeting Barrett Hayton in a trade. I still think he's going to put up 55 plus points. He's taken a lot of shots too, 19 shots in 6 games. He's probably sitting on the wire in most of your leagues, so not telling you guys to pick him up just yet, but he will start producing, and you might want to take a look at him on the wire. He is going to bounce back, getting this deployment on that first line power play, and I think the Coyotes are a much better team, so I'm expecting Hayton to produce, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Next up, we have Devon Levi, and the reason he's a great buy low candidate is because he's injured right now. He didn't play the greatest in the 4 games that he played in. Obviously, looking at his stats here, 3.26 goals against average, .892 save percentage. However, he got 4 games in a row on the Sabres, which was very promising. I was concerned that maybe he wouldn't get as many starts to start the season, but once he is back healthy, right now he's injured, it's a short-term injury, I think he is going to have a lot of value in those points leagues, that value saves and volume. So take a look at a guy like Devon Levi. I'm not sure if the Sabres are going to make it to the playoffs, but still, guys, with this volume and the potential for the Sabres to get a decent amount of wins this year, I think Levi could actually be a pretty great target in trades right now while he's injured. So take a look at him, and if you can snag a good deal for him, then it could be really good long-term. Next up, we have Johnny Gaudreau. 0 goals and a total of 3 assists in 6 games. Not the greatest start for him. What I will say, I want to say this right off the bat, I don't think we're going to see Johnny Gaudreau get back to the Gaudreau that we saw on the Flames. However, I do think he is going to bounce back from these numbers, so he could be a good buy low candidate. I personally think the Blue Jackets are a better team this year. We're seeing them be a better team this year, so I think Gaudreau is going to have value. His deployment is amazing. He's getting over 20 minutes of ice time per game. He's getting lots of power play time as well. So I do think Gaudreau could be in for a decent season. Even if he has a season like last year, he's still going to have value. So do yourself a favor and look at Gaudreau as a potential buy low option. We'll see how it all plays out with Gaudreau, but basically what we're looking at is potentially the lowest value that he's going to have all season. So if you can get a good deal for Gaudreau, I think it could pay off in the long run. The one thing I will say about Gaudreau is that I'm not the biggest fan of him in fantasy. His shots, hits, and blocks are not great at all. So if you're in a points league that values those, or a category league, he's definitely at a disadvantage. If you're in that type of league, don't reach on a guy like Gaudreau. But if you can get him at a really good deal, I think it could be worth it. So try to get creative with these trades and see if you can make something work. Next up, we got to talk about Evander Kane of the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers have had a pretty rough start to the season, and Evander Kane has also struggled quite a bit. He has 1 goal and 2 assists in 6 games, a 7.1 shooting percentage. We've also seen him get bumped down to the 3rd line in some games. He's on the top line right now because McDavid's injured, but when everyone was healthy, he was seeing some minutes on the 3rd line, which he actually complained about in an interview between the games. So I don't know if that's going to be the case throughout the year. I don't think it's going to be the case, especially if he's upset about it, but that is one concern I have with Evander Kane. However, putting those concerns aside, the reason I love Evander Kane is because his peripherals are absolutely incredible. He hits so much. He has 23 hits in 6 games. He takes a lot of shots. His shot volume is a little bit down this season, but I do expect it to go back up to normal. And if we're actually looking at his deployment, like I said, he's seeing some time on the 3rd line. He's still getting good minutes, 17 minutes and 55 seconds of ice time per game. It's a small sample size, but it's only a little bit less than last season. And if we're looking at his power play time, it's pretty much the same. He's on the 2nd power play unit. He hasn't been on the 1st, so that's not a surprise. Still, guys, if you're in a league that heavily values shots, hits, and blocks, Evander Kane has so much value. He was great last year, putting up 16 goals in 41 games with those shots, hits, and blocks. So do yourself a favor and target him in a trade. His value right now could be the lowest that it's going to be all season, so you could get a pretty good deal and it could pay off. Next up, I want to talk about Filip Forsberg of the Nashville Predators. He has 1 goal and 4 assists in 7 games. That isn't terrible, but 1 goal is pretty bad, especially considering Filip Forsberg is a guy who is known as a sniper. His shooting percentage is 3%, which is far lower than his shooting percentage last season and his career rate. That is something I like to take a look at when identifying buy low targets. So that's one reason I think you should buy low on him. But another reason, which is something that I think is very promising, is his deployment. It's a very small sample size, but right now he's averaging 19 minutes and 32 seconds of ice time per game, 2 minutes more than he did last season. He's also getting great power play time as well, which we love to see. So it's definitely promising. Playing 2 more minutes of ice time per game is going to help him put up more points. It's also going to help him put up more shots and put up more hits. He already has 33 shots in 7 games. He's a guy that's putting up a ton of hits as well. We've known that Forsberg is a peripheral beast. The only downside of Forsberg has been his health. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy with his deployment, with these peripherals so far, he is going to have so much value in fantasy. We know that he has a potential to put up elite numbers, especially in the goal department, right? 2 years ago, he had that monster season. He was on pace for almost 50 goals. So I am very high on Filip Forsberg. Target this guy in a trade. I think that it's going to pay off in the long run. People underrate Forsberg quite a bit, so I definitely love him as a trade target right now. Next up, I want to talk about Alex Ovechkin of the Washington Capitals. Now, I will say his buy low window might be closing because he just had a multi-point night. He put up a goal and an assist. That goal was an empty netter, so it's not like he scored and was super impressive. But still, guys, when people see those points, they are going to be less likely to want to trade him. I still think you can get a pretty good deal for him because people have concerns about the Capitals offense. Ovi had a couple of games where he had 0 shots. Right now, his shooting percentage is 7.4%, much lower than his shooting percentage last season, almost half of his career rate. So I do expect him to bounce back. He is a guy that's getting amazing deployment. His total ice time has gone down a little bit, which was to be expected because he is getting older. However, he is pretty much playing 100% of the Capitals power play. That is very valuable, and you know he wants to get that goal record. So he's going to be taking a ton of shots, and he's still going to be scoring a lot of goals. He has a lot of value in the peripheral department. So if your league values shots and hits, he definitely has an edge. That's something to consider. It might have been better to trade Ovi before he had that 14-shot game against Toronto and back-to-back games where he scored, but still, guys, I think you're going to get a discount on him. If you can get him at good value, I say you pull the trigger on a buy low trade. and it should pay off. Next up, I want to talk about Alex Tuch of the Buffalo Sabres, and I do have some concerns about him. I'll just get that out of the way before I talk about his buy low potential. The first concern is that they moved him to the second line because things were not working with the Sabres. They wanted to shuffle things. Right now, he's playing on a line with Casey Mittelstadt and Jeff Skinner. That is definitely worse than playing on a line with Skinner and Tage Thompson. So we'll see how that changes. I want Tuch to be on the first line with Tage Thompson, but we obviously don't know how it's going to play out. Tuch's value definitely takes a little bit of a hit, not playing even strength with Tage Thompson. Yes, he's still playing on the first line power play with him, but something to keep an eye on. And then the second reason that I'm a little bit concerned about Tuch is that if you're looking at his shooting percentage from last year, it was much higher than his career rate. Last season, it was 16.5% compared to his career rate of 11.4%. So you could see some regression from Tuch this season. Last season, he had 79 points in 74 games. He was an over point per game player. There's a chance he doesn't reach those heights again. Now, with that out of the way, what I will say about Alex Tuch is that his shooting percentage right now is very low, 7.7%. That should come back to normal, whether it's closer to his shooting percentage from last season or his career rate. Only time will tell, but still, guys, he should be putting up more points. He's still playing in the Sabres offense that was top 5 in goals scored last season. If you can get a good deal for Alex Tuch, I say go ahead. Now, I don't want you guys reaching on Tuch because of the concerns I mentioned earlier, but I still expect Tuch to put up 30 goals and 70 points. That's a lot of value. He's going to have some big nights and some big weeks in the Sabres offense. Try to get creative with the trade. If you can pull it off, it could really pay off. Next up, we got to talk about Matthew Tkachuk of the Florida Panthers. He has 6 assists in 6 games, which is a point per game. However, he has 0 goals. This is a guy that put up 40 goals and 109 points in 79 games last year, so you might be able to get a pretty good deal for him right now. Now, I fully expected Matt Tkachuk to start off slow going into the season because he suffered a sternum injury in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That sidelined him for a couple of months during the offseason, so I felt that he wasn't going to be fully ready going into the season, that he was going to be a little bit rusty, maybe not in the best shape. Obviously, I think that the more games that he plays, the better he is going to look, shaking off that rust. One thing to consider as well is that the Panthers have some key injuries. They obviously have Sam Bennett out right now. He should return soon, but he's missed pretty much every single game. We also have Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad still on the IR. We don't know when they're going to return exactly. We were given a timeline of November to January, so that could affect Tkachuk as well, with the Panthers being depleted. With all that being said, Tkachuk has started off slow, but he may continue to struggle for the next couple of weeks for those reasons mentioned. So definitely take a look at Tkachuk as a target in a buy low trade. If you can get a deal for him, it is going to pay off in the long run because this guy is a superstar. He's been amazing for the last 2 seasons, and he is going to perform when it matters the most in the fantasy playoffs. So definitely a guy I love buying low on right now. The next buy low target I want to talk about is goaltender Filip Gustavsson of the Minnesota Wild. He has a 3.95 goals against average and a .897 save percentage in 4 games, which hasn't been great. Last year, he was incredible. Looking at his stats here, guys, 2.10 goals against average, .931 save percentage. I understand that this is a very big difference. However, we do have to address the fact that this is only through 4 games, guys. It's a very, very small sample size, so we can't take it seriously. Another thing that you guys need to consider is that the Minnesota Wild have been plagued with injuries this season, especially to their defensemen. So that is hurting Gustavsson, right? They need defensemen to defend the puck. There's been games where the Wild haven't been able to run a full roster because they didn't have enough guys available. So these players are getting overworked, and this is costing the Wild and their goaltenders. We saw the Blue Jackets on a back-to-back put up 54 shots against the Wild, so Gustavsson was getting no help in that situation. Once those defensemen get healthy, you are going to see an improvement in Gustafsson's numbers and the Minnesota Wild all around. So you're going to be able to get a discount on him because of his numbers, and you might be able to get a discount on him because people are seeing that Fleury's still getting starts. This was obviously a major downside to Gustavsson last season because Fleury started more games than him. Gustavsson only had 39 games. That's not very valuable in fantasy, especially if you're in a league like a points league where volume really matters. This season, we are hoping that Gustavsson is going to get more starts than Fleury. Obviously, we have a very small sample size. We saw Gustavsson get the first 2 games, Fleury gets the next 2 games, and then Gustavsson got the next 2 games. We'll see how it all plays out, but I've said this in the past. I personally think that his workload is going to increase as his season progresses. Fleury is about to be 39 years old. He is not that good. Gustavsson is a much better goalie, so Gustavsson, his workload is going to increase, and I think it's going to be a 2-to-1 split moving forward, and even potentially better when we get into March and April when the fantasy playoffs start. So overall, boys, if you need a goalie, I suggest you target Filip Gustavsson in a trade. It's the perfect window of opportunity to buy low on him. I think he has the potential to be a league winner, so make sure you target him, and it could really pay off. Next up, I want to talk about Tage Thompson of the Buffalo Sabres, and I'll keep this brief, guys, because the window to buy low on him might be over. He just had 3 points on Tuesday. His stats are still not that great if we're looking at his stats in 7 games. 3 goals and 1 assist. Compared to last season, he had 47 goals and 94 points in 78 games. So there is still a chance you can get a discount on him, but you might have to wait until he posts another dud or two for you to really get a good buy low. We know he started off super slow last season until that big Halloween game. So if you post another dud or two, like I said, look to trade for him. You can get a discount on him, and he's a guy that can single-handedly win you weeks. Yes, there is a chance for some regression from last season, but I still think he is going to be a fantastic fantasy player. So try to get creative and trade for him if you can. And if you can get good value, it should really pay off. Next up, we have Jason Robertson of the Dallas Stars. And yes, I understand he had a goal and an assist on Tuesday. The window to buy low on him might have closed. However, guys, he still only has 1 goal in 5 games, 7.7% shooting percentage. He is a guy that is certainly going to bounce back, and you might be able to get a discount on him. Robertson has been fantastic in the last couple of seasons, especially last year, putting up 46 goals and 109 points. My only concern with Robertson right now is that you're seeing 1 minute and 20 seconds less of ice time per game this year than last season. I would like to see those ice totals go up, but still, guys, he's 24 years old, and that line of Hintz, Pavelski, and Robertson was so good last year. You could argue that with Hintz having an injury during training camp and preseason, that this could have affected them developing chemistry and getting started, so that could be a reason why some of those numbers are slow to start. We also know that the power play of the Stars was amazing last year. It was a 30% power play, top 5 in the league. This season, they are bottom 10, only 12.5%, so expect this to come back to normal. It's the exact same power play as it was last season. With all that being said, guys, if you can buy low on Jason Robertson and get good value for him, I think you should absolutely do it. He is a superstar, and I do think you're getting a discount on him, so try to get creative and trade for him. Next up, I want to talk about Nico Hischier. He just scored again tonight against the Washington Capitals, back-to-back games with goals, but if we're looking at his stats, he has 2 goals and 0 assists in 6 games, which has been pretty disappointing. I did have some concerns about Nico Hischier earlier on in the season because the Devils were splitting their power plays into 2. They were running both the first unit and the second unit evenly. However, like I predicted, they went back to a dedicated first unit and a second unit, and Hischier is on that first unit, so I definitely had a sigh of relief there. It's very good news for Hischier. And yes, if you're looking at his ice time right here, it is lower than last season. I do expect it to be a little bit lower than last season, but this number is skewed because Hischier actually left one of the games with an injury, so he's still getting plenty of ice time, plenty of power play time. I know that he started off slow, but I still firmly believe Hischier is going to have a ton of value this season. I still expect him to put up 80 plus points. The reason for this is because this Devils offense is absolutely electric, and like I said, he's on the first line power play playing alongside Jack Hughes. If that continues, then Hischier is going to have some massive weeks, some massive nights. Jack Hughes is looking like he could win the Hart Trophy this year, and this power play is currently first in the NHL, shooting at a 42% rate. If you can buy low on a guy playing top 6 minutes on the best power play in the league, you need to do it, so make sure you trade for Nico Hischier. I really think it's going to pay off. Next up, we have Jordan Kyrou, and obviously this guy started off slow, 1 goal and 2 assists in 5 games. The reason you should buy low on him is because his shooting percentage is very low, 5.9% compared to a career rate of 13.3%. It's going to come back to normal. We also know that Kyrou started off slow last season as well, and then he picked it back up, so he could just be a slow starter. Another thing to consider is that Pavel Buchnevich has missed a handful of games, so that has definitely affected Kyrou. Kyrou, all during preseason and training camp, was playing on the first line with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, so now that Buchnevich is back and healthy, I expect Kyrou to put up some better nights. Kyrou put up 37 goals in 79 games last year, despite having a slow start and playing a good part of the season on a line with Ryan O'Reilly, who really struggled. So now that he's playing on the top line with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, I think there's a chance he could put up 40 plus goals. The only concern I have right now is that the Blues power play has been absolutely terrible. They are 4th worst in the league, shooting at a 6.67%. it's not going to cut it for Kyrou in fantasy if the power play continues to be bad. So hopefully this can improve. It's a very small sample size, only 5 games. Obviously, we had Buchnevich miss a handful of games. That's affected the power play. I do want them to try Verona on the first line power play. I think that could help. But yeah, that is my only concern with the Blues. We'll see what happens. Still, guys, I think Kyrou is a great buy low candidate. He was a great buy low candidate last season if your league didn't count plus minus. So make sure you trade for him, and I think it's really going to pay off long term. The best buy low candidate right now, guys, is Roman Josi of the Nashville Predators. He has 0 goals and 3 assists in 7 games, so not very good numbers. There could be some panicked managers that are looking to trade Josi away, and you need to capitalize on it. The reason for this is pretty simple, guys. Roman Josi has been the best fantasy hockey defenseman in the last 2 seasons. Last year, he had 18 goals and 59 points in 67 games. And that was following a campaign where he almost had 100 points. So this is an elite fantasy hockey defenseman. Not only can he score goals and put up points, but he has amazing peripherals, guys. He takes so many shots. He averaged 4 shots a game last season. And this season so far, he has 24 shots in 7 games. I've also seen a couple of Nashville games, and he's had plenty of chances. He had a goal called back against Tampa. I think that was the first game of the NHL season. If you're looking at his ice time, it has gone down a little bit, 1 minute and 13 seconds, but I'm not worried about that whatsoever. He's still playing a lot of minutes. He's still getting a lot of power play time. Yes, Nashville doesn't look amazing on paper, but they weren't amazing on paper last season either. So I do expect them to be a similar team. Filip Forsberg is healthy as well now. So I think Josi is still going to have a ton of value, and you need to trade for him. I think this is the perfect opportunity to buy low on a player of this caliber. So do it before it's too late. He is going to have a big night at some point, and then you won't be able to trade for him. He has so much value, guys, especially if your league counts peripherals. So please do yourself a favor and buy low on him if you can. All right, boys, that's the end of the video. Hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.